With so many iterations of Scooby-Doo out there, it's extremely easy to not remember each and every one of them. But sometimes, it's not because you couldn't remember it, but more so that the higher-ups wanted to bury the memory of it in general. The show itself, the art style of it, the changes to the characters and focus of the narrative are all things to look at for why some fans of Scooby-Doo could be turned away from liking this show or giving it a chance in general. But larger decisions from the top of the studios may have been what kept this version of Scooby-Doo from finding a grander audience in general. Today, we are talking about the often forgotten Shaggy and Scooby-Doo Get a Clue, a series that put the focus on those two characters first and foremost to create something new both visually and in tone for the franchise at a time when trying new things for legacy properties such as Scooby-Doo wasn't as easy as just slapping the well-known name on something and sending it out to the masses. As the landscape changed, the shows had to adapt. Some found success with this, and some end up in this little bit of remembrance that makes you question if they even happened in the first place. While Scooby-Doo would later go on to find more success trying to adapt the franchise in new ways after this, Shaggy and Scooby-Doo Get a Clue leaves us with an interesting little take on the property that is worth exploring a bit. So let's do that. Now, Scooby-Doo is a franchise that I feel the older I get, the more I fall in love with. Aside from having the handful of iterations that I love the most, I have just grown such a fondness for the characters in general. So getting to dig into a series that didn't last too long in terms of the number of episodes, mixed with it then getting shoved aside and forgotten about to move on with something else that would be different for the property, makes it all that much more exciting to see if there was something here that was great. On the other end of that, this might add on to the understanding of why it maybe didn't work and was given up on by Warner Brothers. Either way, we should get a clue, or even maybe a few, in understanding the bigger picture here. The series gets you invested into the lives of Shaggy and Scooby from the jump, seeing that their living situation isn't the greatest, they don't have much money, and thus they don't have much food to eat when they're hungry, which is always. So this brings us the twist for them in their lives when Shaggy's Uncle Albert ends up missing, and because of this, Shaggy is left being the one directly named to inherit all the uncle had. This includes a mansion, a robot butler, $1 billion, and some villains. The other stuff sounds really nice, but the villains part definitely adds on to the mystery of how or why Shaggy's uncle has gone missing. Mystery that kind of gets explained a little bit in the first episode anyway. As it turns out, the bad guys are after Shaggy's uncle's nanotechnology, with the secret of how they're made being baked into Scooby snacks that now give Scooby an array of different powers or effects that end up aiding in the coming situations Shaggy and Scoob find themselves in, which is kind of like world-saving spies. On top of this, Shaggy upgrades the mystery machine to be a transforming vehicle capable of turning itself into new versions of itself to also aid in certain situations, or just be used for the most useless things. Well, useless things to many others. Of course, Shaggy and Scoob need the mystery machine to turn itself into some sort of food making and dispensing device, right? So with such a different concept for the franchise to head in, what helped for their set Get a Clue apart from the other iterations of Scooby-Doo out there? What led to its downfall and why it kind of disappeared for good?
Hello? Zoinks!
Shaggy and Scooby-Doo Get a Clue was born out of the changing of times, where the series before this one, What's New, Scooby-Doo, did a great job in bringing the classic Scooby-Doo formula to the modern day of the early 2000s. But Warner Brothers wanted to do something new, something fresh, something that would breathe new air for the property. We touched on this when speaking about the series that follows Get a Clue, Mystery Incorporated, but here they were in the testing ground of what the heck they should do. Ray De Laurentiis, who had been a writer on cartoons around that time such as Ozzy and Drix and Shaolin Showdown, was tasked with developing what this new version of Scooby-Doo would be. There really wasn't any set of hard rules to follow in making Get a Clue either. Essentially, Ray was given a blank slate to create something completely new for Scooby-Doo and not be held by the formula that Scooby-Doo would traditionally follow. This open invite to make something from scratch had Ray jump to the idea of just focusing on Shaggy and Scooby, having the most interest in these characters anyway thanks to seeing them as the main characters. I mean, one of them is literally the title, Scooby-Doo, and the other is Scooby's best bud, the lovable, hungry, and easily frightened Shaggy. But what would be interesting about following just these two? Well, Ray figured that giving them this insane inheritance to play around with gives us a fun look into the characters who are used to only having so little and now suddenly have access to a lot. It would be a way to watch these characters who we often see as being scared or less heroic now become the main focus as we see them branch away from the others to really become their own versions of heroes. How does this change them in their their way of life, and on top of that, how does that affect what they do, solve mysteries? Well, it turns out things were changed greatly, and much like the following series, Mystery Incorporated, the show had a large overall mystery regarding Shaggy's uncle, while still having these other situations to deal with and mysteries to solve in the meantime between that. From there, it was just concepts and ideas to play with, from having the main villain being developed in a comedic yet dangerous tone, and wanting to bring forth something different like nanotech capabilities for Scoob. Not even a full week later into the development of things, the show was brought forth to Warner Brothers, and the green light was given from all that had just been put together. Ray was in a good spot here. He was liked by the higher-ups, his ideas were liked by both the higher-ups and the focus-tested groups, and now he could essentially create whatever he wanted to do with the brand for the series, making the creative decisions on where to take the show, and even go back in to fix things up if certain things were not liked or needed some tweaking. This also comes at a cost though. As there was the freedom to make anything, there wasn't a lot of time to make it all happen. We all know that cartoons more than anything get put on such crazy tight schedules to get episodes produced that it can often lead to a pretty rough and tiring work environment for all involved. The other problem with this, more specifically in the case of Get a Clue, is that Ray was left to himself to write out most of the scripts, not having a real writer's room like most shows would, having him spend days detailing a script to be as great as it can so it can be delivered with all the right notes to the artists, animators, and voice actors as to keep a solid pacing of producing the episodes for the series. Eventually, the series premiered on the Kids WB block on the CW, September 23rd, 2006, and Shaggy, along with Scoob, have to deal with the evil Dr. Phibes' plans of a long list of evil things he's doing as we continue to see a cast of characters that operate within each episode's plots to differing degrees. Whether they be the lovable goofballs Agent 1 and 2, or Roby and his overly destructive ways as a robot butler, the main rotation of characters we'd meet all pretty much had a nice unique charm to them, making more of these side characters feel more like a mainstay cast thanks to how we explored their characters through the show. The special new thing here in the series is that thanks to the nanotechnology in which Dr. Phibes is after, it's used in the secret special recipe for what would be regular Scooby snacks, and now Scoob can transform into almost anything. Other than that, the show feels a bit empty with what to do with these concepts. Shaggy and Scooby-Doo Get a Clue as a series by itself leaves a lot to be desired with what they had built up for the show to be. Comparatively towards the other iterations, this one focuses a lot on the comedy aspect of it all, making the focus on what's going on feel less important than landing a joke. But in saying that, the show does tend to land a lot of the jokes. Yes, there are your typical easy to go to lower end jokes that are base level just gross out slapstick or potty humor, but there is a lot of bits thanks to the characters themselves delivering them or how the situation presents them that often feel a lot more thought out. You can see the writing in those moments coming through a lot stronger versus other jokes that you can feel were rushed or spent less time developed in order to meet the deadlines given in production. It's a mixed bag of chuckles and genuine laughs that make it feel like there is something more here than not, but depth-wise, when it comes to furthering the story or overall plot, a lot of it can end up feeling like filler due to the limitations given to the show. Speaking of the plot, I think it's the strongest aspect in many ways, offering a solid through-line narrative and figuring out everything regarding Shaggy's uncle. The growth of the characters, both good guys and bad, feels earned and achieved as they go along, and it doesn't end up feeling like nothing has changed. And since the show has this momentum-building main mystery, it's important to show how Shaggy and Scoob are moving forward, how the main villain Phibes is moving forward, and where the story of it all ends us at, having to deliver a solid conclusion or else what was it all for? And for that, it did leave off on a feel-good note, wrapping up the series in a nice way that acts as an ending to the great mystery at hand involving Shaggy's uncle. So even if there was a third season given to the show, Ray doesn't know where that could have even gone, as different ideas of raising the stakes higher, adding in new things about characters we already know, finding ways to incorporate new or legacy characters, and more would really just be taking the show to a new starting point, as by the end of season 2, the main situation is resolved, and it feels concrete for the most part. Continuing it from there wouldn't necessarily break that, but it would make the ending a bit less impactful for what it was. But to even get to this point, it wasn't easy. The ratings in terms of viewership was pretty good, so then why did it have to wrap things up and come to an end? And on top of that, why was it seemingly hidden much like Shaggy's Uncle Albert?
Shaggy and Scooby-Doo get a clue! We're living large, Scoob!
After 2 seasons, the show was over, but so was the Kids W block on Saturday mornings on the CW, as it would transition from Kids WB to the CW for Kids, not making the cut when the rebranding happened to continue on where only a few shows did, as new shows would find their way there. But with all this happening, the show didn't get to go anywhere. Get a Clue didn't even get reruns on places like Cartoon Network or Boomerang, leading to the show feeling non-existent and forgotten about for around a decade until 2018, where the entire show would be made available on Boomerang's streaming service, giving it a small little bump for Scooby-Doo fans to find again or discover for the first time outside of a couple DVD releases. Again, the freedom to create something brand new was there, and that was nice, but having a tight production schedule to produce the episodes and a limited budget that led to many animation errors, or just more stiff animation in general, really held the show back from being what it could have been. More time overall would have led to the show having a chance at larger ideas and even bringing in the rest of the Scooby-Doo gang more often. But now these only exist as what ifs and wants. It's a shame when that happens because it wasn't for the lack of wanting to do more, but for not being able to do more. As far as the art style of the show, it definitely has a very uncanny feeling. Originally, the idea was to have the main cast of Scooby-Doo characters have a larger resemblance towards their live-action movie counterparts, a point to which I don't think they necessarily do all that much. But the real question is, why do that in the first place? I know brand recognition is one thing, but usually aside from small changes here or there, the Scooby-Doo characters, whether cartoon or live action, all follow the same base mold of how these characters look and dress. Plus here, it's mainly just Shaggy and Scoob. The rest of the cast are side characters that don't really play into much here at all. Shaggy himself looks the most different, giving him a new shirt that for some reason reminds me of Joey Wheeler's Battle City fit, but that's just me. Regardless, the look of the show definitely goes in another direction from the usual look Hanna-Barbera had for the characters, giving it one of the most distinct looks for the franchise outside of a pup named Scooby-Doo and the eventual Be Cool Scooby-Doo. Other Scooby-Doo shows had slight variations on the art style, but here, I think it's the most drastic to where it truly feels nothing like Scooby-Doo, while still kind of feeling like Scooby-Doo, if that makes sense. It's hard to explain because it looks so different, but yet I am familiar with what I am seeing. I feel that this point, the way that the show looks, is the biggest indicator for those who gave the show a chance and those who didn't want to look at it. On top of that, Ray didn't have any control over how the show looked. He had control of the ideas, the writing, etc., but not what the actual show would end up looking like, even saying that he isn't necessarily a fan of how the final product looked. While Eric Radomski, known best for his work on Batman the Animated Series, was the one designing the look of the show and created a unique look for it all, it just wasn't what Ray had envisioned when developing his ideas, becoming a part of the show that he just had to go with. To me at least, I don't mind the look, and in many ways I get this fun Venture Brothers vibe to it thanks to people like Agents 1 and 2 here. It by far isn't my favorite look for the Scooby-Doo world, but I don't think it's bad or doesn't fit. I wish the property would play more into trying different art styles in general between the different series more than they have. The essence of Scooby-Doo can be brought out through the characters. The art can help create a new canvas for their stories, so I'd love to see that on a larger scale. They're not always going to be for everybody, but I always get excited when a property such as this tries something new. Shaggy and Scooby-Doo Get a Clue isn't a perfect show, but it had some fun ideas to play around with. Focusing on just Shaggy and Scooby, while being fun at points, doesn't work for Scooby-Doo as a whole as much. If anything, it makes this iteration of the franchise feel like the definition of a spin-off, rather than a brand new series. Scooby-Doo for me works best when all the players are involved. The majority absence of Velma, Fred, and Daphne is felt, and to not give them any real importance makes the show feel a lot more empty than it is. However, it's not a long show, only lasting a total of 2 seasons totaling 26 episodes, making it a pretty easy breezy watch through. It just might turn out to not be your cup of tea for the same reasons I don't consider it the best offering from the property, but who knows, you may just end up loving it for those same reasons. But as far as Shaggy and Scooby-Doo Get a Clue, that's it for this short-lived series. It lives on as this little moment in the legacy of Scooby-Doo that some remember, some love, and some have never heard of. But if you remember it, let me know your thoughts on this version of Scooby-Doo. Do you think it should have had more of a chance? Tell me in the comments. I've been Jordan Fringe. Thanks so much for watching. Like and subscribe. Later.